Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Very good afternoon. Very good afternoon. I formally welcome you to our online class being offered by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. I am your counselor, S.M. Fasiullah, and we are going to deal with the course 7, which is titled Aspects of Language and Their Relation to Literature. Continuing the topic that we started in the last class, that is about functions of literature, and in that we began talking about republic, and after that we also discussed about the role of what Aristotle plays in response to what Plato has said about poets being inferior, poets should be banned, and all those things. And he comes up with this concept of catharsis, which is cleansing of emotions. We have had an elaborate discussion about what catharsis is and what is its role in literature and also in our own lives, right? Now, we'll move on to some other people who talked about these concepts, right? About what literature, what should be the goal and objective of literature, and what function it has in the society. Okay, right from classical time, right, the time of the Greeks, right? We have come to Middle Ages, where one of the important British philosopher, his name is Sir Philip Sidney. He also says something about the poetry, right? And as I told you earlier, it was the word literature was not there in usage, right? It became popular only maybe in the modern age, right? Modern times. But in classical time, it was not called literature, right? The dominant genres were poetry and drama, right? So at that time, the word poetics means poetry means literature in general. Okay. Now here, Sir Philip Sidney comes. He comes much later. Compared to Aristotle and Plato. And he says that he's basically a philosopher the Renaissance period, right? It was one of the period in English history where a major contribution has come from a set of scholars, and it was a period where British people started imitating other civilizations, from France, from Italy, and other, and also Greeks. So in that particular period, Sir Philip Sidney comes and talks about defending the poetry, right? And his defense, when we hear the word defense, right, it means he is trying to say something in response to some for example some charge, that is why when there is a case, right, in general, when there is a case, there is somebody who is a respondent, and there's somebody who is actually defending it, right? The petitioner and the respondent. In a case, you have these two different parties, right? Petitioner and the respondent, and there would be a professional person called lawyer who would defend their clients. So, which means there is something before the defense. So, in case of Sir Philip Sidney, right, when he writes defense of poesy, right, or defense of poetry, right, as an essay, as a treatise, he is actually basically responding to another gentleman, the British gentleman. His name is Stephen Gosson, right? He comes up with a work. This Gosson comes up with a work called The School of Abuse, right? And he lays some charges against poetry, right? The way we came to know about Plato and his charge that poets are inferior and poets must be banished because they mislead the society. Similar kind of charges Stephen Gosson comes up with against poetry and poets. So what basically the charge is, number one, there are 5 different, I think 4 different charges, right? Which Gosson says about poetry. First one is waste of time, right? It is not Philip Sidney who is doing it. It is actually the charge laid by Gosson against the poetry. So these 4 charges are actually by Stephen Gosson. Remember this. So first one is poetry is considered as waste of time, which means literature is basically waste of time according to Stephen Gosson. Right? We'll critically look at that and in what way and how Sir Philip Sidney defended poetry and responded to Stephen Gosson's in the next slide. But let's see what were the charges that is laid by Stephen Gosson against literature in general. So literature is considered as waste of time. Poetry is considered as waste of time. Second, it is mother of lies. Right? Waste of time means in producing literature, right? The person who is producing it and the person who is reading it, both are what they are wasting the time. Why? Why you think this is the charge? Any guess? Literature produce cheyadam, literature chadvadam, adi waste of time ani Stephen Gosson enduku cheppadu. Daniki artham enti? If you recall what we discussed regarding Plato in the previous class, you can make a guess why this charge. Any attempt? Any guess from your end? Why this charge that producing literature and consumption of literature is a waste of time?
Poetry is the divide of facts.
Yes, absolutely. You are absolutely right. Right. He is speaking in the spirit of Plato. Right. The apprehension that Plato had, the bayam that Plato, the worry that Plato had, that literature takes you away from the reality, takes you away from the actual truth. That is why production of literature, right, and its propagation and promotion and its consumption should be not allowed, should not be allowed, right? Because in the classical philosophy, the Platonian philosophy or Greek philosophy, we call it, the absolute truth is God and his realm, his prapancham. What we are living in this particular material world, it is what we say, if a filtered form of, or what we say, a copy of the actual reality, the actual truth. And that is why if you look at major religions of the world, made by Christianity, right, or Hinduism or Islam, right, you have this concept where the God is the supreme, right, and his realm, his prapancham is the absolute prapancham, right? You and I, right, or this world has an end, is limited, can deform, can decompose, can be destroyed. can go to extinct, would end sometime or the other. This is not the perfect world. This is not the absolute reality that we are living in. Even today, after this so much advance in sciences, right? Physicists believe that we are living in a simulated reality. Though simulation reality are oxymoron, but they are trying to say that the world we are living in is actually a simulation, which means it's a copy. It's not the original. It is not the absolute. Pilots are trained before they are actually taken to the real flight in a programmed manner, in a simulated environment. They go through the training in a room where they experience the whole aircraft, everything that they find in aircraft, sitting on a chair, they experience everything, how to manage everything. Now we have that concept called virtual reality, where there is a kind of electronic set on your head, and you are lost into a world. You are no more in the material world. You go into a virtual world. You experience life there. You fly, you jump, you cry, you laugh, everything you do in that particular world. So similarly, the whole material world that we are right now, there are philosophers, there are scientists who say that it is more like simulation, right, where there is a possibility of the higher and the better world beyond us, beyond this entire universe. And this concept is there. Though that concept is explained in different religious terminologies in a religious fashion, but that concept is there, that ours is not the real world or the ultimate world, the absolute world. So that is what Greek concept, right, of truth of God, right, is there. And the way he thinks that Plato thinks that this ultimate world, this is second copy and third copy, third time removed from the reality. So engaging in production of literature and its consumption is like being away from the actual truth. So what they think that if you are a human being, you need to know who your creator is, that is God. You need to go closer to him, and the possibility is through revelations or sacred texts, isn't it? It is through sacred texts you are able to identify your God. You are able to identify the reality of this, the world, and why we are being sent to this, what we are doing here, and what we should do here. All those things are explained in variety of religious texts. Right. So what Greeks say is that you go from 2 to 1. Right. This should be your objective, to understand truth, to remain as close to truth as possible. But by producing literature, you are actually going away from the actual thing. Okay. So that is why Stephen Gossin, like any Greek philosopher, like Platonian understanding, he says that production of literature and its consumption is like waste of time. The second charge is mother of lies. Mother of lies means whatever you write, whatever in literature, that is nothing but a lie. Now, again, this is with reference to the ultimate reality, the God. Right? What God says is truth, because God himself or herself or itself is a truth. What we perceive may or may not be truth. Isn't it? Because ours is a very subjective, existence. Ours is not an objective existence. I'll give you an example. It was a time when some scientists and philosophers thought that, world is flat. And some other thought it's, sphere. Right. This was for a certain period of time. Then our understanding evolved. Our scientific advancement, reached certain levels, and then we came to know that no, it's not a flat. Earth is not flat. Earth is actually a sphere, right? So, how many of you believe that our Earth is a sphere? These are the basic things, no? Yeah. At one point of time, people and philosophers and scientists thought that our Earth was flat. But then came people with different understanding and different what we say way of looking at things, and then say no, it's not a flat. Earth is not flat. It is basically a sphere, right? Now, do you agree our Earth is a sphere?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Thank you. But now, further advancement, right? And in 20th century and later, we have come to realize it's not actually a sphere, it's geoid. Right? It is basically the shape of our Earth is not a sphere. It is slightly different. And for that, we have a lot of calculations. Right? Scientists call it geoid. Geoid, geoid. So it is a much more refined form, much more. It's not exactly a sphere, it's actually a geoid. Now, this is the current understanding that we have as per sciences, as per scientific advancement. So those who called it to be flat, they had their own arguments, right? Those who called it circular or spherical, they have their own arguments. And now, people who are calling it geoid have their own arguments. What I'm trying to convey through this particular example is that human understanding do change, human facts do change, human what we say truth changes, and that is why most of the time we have arguments between people, among people, because one sees reality in one way and they say something, the other sees in reality in another way, says something, and somebody else sees reality in a completely different way and they say something, or some other people view it completely differently. That's why you have multiple perspectives or multiple truths of the same phenomena, right? There is a classical example. Example is that, this is 1857, right? What happened on 1857?
Mutiny.
Sepoy Mutiny. The first War of Independence.
సిపాయిల తిరుగుబాటు.
So, see, here itself we have two different perspectives or two different truths. Every truth is truth only. From British point of view, it was Sepoy
ఫస్ట్ వార్ ఆఫ్
mutiny. British
Great
viewed
mutiny.
it as mutiny because it was British administration and some people revolted against it, right? And that is why it is termed as mutiny.
Great mutiny.
Whatever it is, right? Great or not, but it was a revolt against the British, so that is why it is termed as officially Sepoy mutiny because it was done by certain sepoys. But there is another perspective to it. People who are Indian, right? People who thought that this foreign government should go away because this government is not pro-local people, pro-Indians, right? And these people actually, found this revolt against British as a very good thing, and they termed it as First War of Independence. Now, incident is same. You have two different truths. Now, people who are at this side of the fence, right? When they are saying War of Independence, that doesn't nullify this fact that it was a mutiny. And people who are looking at the incident from this point of view and calling it mutiny cannot nullify the fact that it was a War of Independence. So one incident, multiple perspectives. Right. So when it comes to human, understanding, interpretation, and expression, there are always possibilities of multiple perspectives, or you call it multiple truths. Right. So that is why whatever you write in poetry or in literature in general is nothing but what? Mother of lies. Now the question is how literature in general differs from philosophy. Right. Now it's also a kind of war between philosophers and poets. Right, because Plato himself compared philosophers and poets, right?
Yeah.
So if that is what it is, we'll see how it is different. Philosophers basically deal in the realm of or in the field of logic. Right? They deal in the field of logic. Literature, people of literature deal in the field of experience. It could be real experience or imagined experience. Literature in general. Okay. So logic, it's very difficult to defeat logic, to deny logic, but it is hard to it is easy to deny any experience. So that is why logic has upper hand. You got it? And that is why logic is the basis on which your cases are dealt with. Judgments are passed. If you go to a court of law, You say, Naku itla ayindi, Naku atla ayindi. They'll say, fine, keep those things aside. They'll dig into the cause and effect behind it. That is the logic. They'll ask questions. What happened? How it happened? When it happened? Who did it? Itla did it? All those things. And then they look at what you are saying as a case in a logical way. And based on logic, they conclude something and they pass a judgment. Now, if something is decided in a court of law, it's difficult to challenge. Why? In human knowledge, logic takes precedence over everything. And that is why court is considered as supreme. Got my point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Gosson is trying to tell us is that, whatever we are doing as man of literature or women of literature, we are actually telling lies because we don't have the absolute perspective, the objective reality before us. Ours is a very subjective, perception and reproduction of that perception. This material world could be one objective reality, no doubt about it. But this material world is perceived by every human being in a different way. Do you agree with this or not? No two persons perceive the entire world in the same way.
Yes, sir.
Which means there are possibilities of different perspectives or different truths. So if your perception itself has multiple perspectives, then when you write it, you are reproducing that perspective, which is again going far away from truth according to Plato. So eventually what you are writing and teaching others through the literature is basically indulging in lies. Then one more thing he says that it's a nurse of abuse. Unfortunately, in literature, there is a lot of abuse. Abuse against people, abuse against values, abuse against traditions, and blah blah. I'll give you one example, just to make a point. What he's trying to say here, what Stephen Gosson is trying to say here. Stephen Gosson, you have you heard of the post-colonial thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. In post-colonial, take any text. Right? Maybe Heart of Darkness or any text like that. You take that text, it's a piece of fiction. It's basically a novel, right? Or you take any similar novel which is written by a colonizer, right? You know this terminology, colonizer, right? For us, Britishers were colonizers and we were colonized, right?
Yeah.
Natives. We are natives of India, and at one point of time, Britishers came to India, colonized us, right? When they colonized us, they wrote about us also in the form of novels, right? Poetry, drama, right? Or prose also. What they showed us, did they show as heroes? As extraordinary people very good at wise people or intelligent people? Did they show all these things about us? No. They showed as snake charmers. They showed as people who doesn't follow hygiene. They showed us people who don't have sense of dressing. You read literature produced in, say, 19th century, 18th century about India or Indians. You come to know that, how poorly we Indians have been projected in the fiction or non-fiction produced by the colonizers. Now, don't you think that, these colonizers have made use of, literature to abuse us? Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes. If God has given you intellect, you are using it to, colonize people. You are using it to enslave people. You are using it to, abuse people. Then you are basically abusing the very power that God has given you. That is intellect. If you have literature, right, as a form of writing, formal form of writing, as a skill, as a ability, right, then what you have done, historically speaking, you have abused. And that is why Stephen Gosson comes and says, no, boss, we know you make use of literature to abuse. So it's a nurse of abuse. And lastly, he seconds with Plato, or he agrees with Plato that he rightly banished poets, because by doing all these things, right, by wasting time of the society, that is readers, by telling lies to the society, by abusing people, some sections or many sections in the society, what you are doing, you are spoiling the society, you are doing harm to the society. And that is why Plato was right in banishing the poets, that is people who produce literature. So these were the 4 charges that Stephen Gosson comes up with against poetry. So in defense of it, Sidney comes and he writes an essay or a treatise with the title An Apology for Poetry. In his response, what Sir Philip Sidney says, that poetry is the highest form of art. Poetry is the highest form of art. Right. Thank God he understands that it is an art, and he acknowledges that it's an art. He defends it, saying in 4 different ways. There are 4 charges, so he comes up with 4 responses. It is a source of knowledge. Right. There, Stephen Gosson says it's a waste of time, but he says it's a source of knowledge. He says that it is through literature we human beings can propagate knowledge. Right. Now take example of Panchatantra as a piece of literature. So there is one view that reading literature itself is wasting time. That is also logically correct. But another perspective is reading that one story, right, about monkey and crocodile, gives us some wisdom or not. It definitely gives some wisdom to us about friendship, about loyalty, and other things. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So that is why Philip Sidney says, it's a source of knowledge. And then he says, poet is the least liar among all writers. Now you take all writers, among them, if there is one liar who is very least, then that is poet. You have historian as a liar, right? You have philosopher as a liar. So many people who write, they are all liars. Okay. Then among them, which means here liar means not jhuta. It means, people who take you away from God and ultimate reality. That is what it means. It's not, the one who tells lie. You understand that, okay? So if everybody is basically, imitating, if everybody is, talking about worldly things, right? If everybody is, telling you things which are not absolute truth, then among all such people, this poet who is least liar. How? Perhaps the intention of the poet is not to mislead you. Now I'll give you an example. You have committed a crime, knowingly or unknowingly, and case is filed against you. You go to the court. What is the intention of you going to the court? And what is the intention of your lawyer? Prove you innocent? Isn't it? To get you acquitted? Yes, that is why you pay him money. Now tell me what you and your lawyer are trying to tell. The truth or the lie? Obviously, it is to tell lie. If not tell lie, suppress the fact so that you will get least punishment. Now, if a poet is writing a poem, a writer is writing, say, a short story or a novel, does he have something in mind to mislead somebody, to hide facts? No. In general, no. Any writer, whether it's a poet, a dramatist, or a novelist, doesn't produce their stories to mislead people. It is not their intention in general. They say it or they write it because they experience that in their real life, or they have seen people experiencing such a story, or have gone through that kind of feeling, emotional experience. So do you find the element of lie there? No. Perhaps this is why Sir Philip Sidney says that poet is the least liar among all writers. And coming to the point of the truth, right? You know that poetry or any other form of literature has actually glorified God, has upheld the moral values, has actually propagated moral values. So, if that is what it is, then poetry is least far away from the truth compared to other forms of literature, other forms of writings. Then you have two more responses. Poetry doesn't abuse man's wit, it abuses wit abuses poetry. Now, what he is trying to tell us that it is not poetry that is abusing others. It is through human wit, man is actually abusing poetry. I give you an example. Now. If God has given you intelligence, you make use of it for better of the humanity. If you are making use of it to suppress humanity, to oppress them, to exploit them, then it is not the fault of the intellect. It is the fault of the person who is being given that intellect, and he is using wrong in a wrong way. And that is what Philip Sidney also says. If there is some problem in literature, then it is not because of literature itself. It is because of certain people with wrong intentions, ulterior motives, using literature against somebody. The last point is, Plato warned men not against poetry, but it's abused by poets. Now he is here making a clear distinction of what Plato actually meant when he proposed that poets should be banned. So here, Plato, according to Philip Sidney, was not against poetry itself. He was against people, that is, poets, making wrong use of literature. Which means, instead of banishing poets, what he basically meant is regulating it, which is nothing but today, say for example in India, say 100 plus movies are made a year, but can they screen those movies in India without being approved by censor board? No, they cannot.
No, they cannot. Yes.
Which means, even though you are producing cinema, a movie to entertain Indians and others, even though you have a good intention, there is a possibility that things that you write, things that you want to show people may be wrong, may be misleading, may incite hatred, right? So that is why there is a regulatory body called censorship or Censor Board of India who clears your movie for screening if they find it non-controversial and it is not telling a lie and it is not abusive, it's not inciting any hatred or showing any kind of violence or other things, other sensitive things. So the intention, according to Philip Sidney, of Plato was to have or to regulate literature rather than completely banning the people who produce literature. Yeah. So these are the four different interesting responses that Philip Sidney has given to the charges by Stephen Gosson. Whether there is a question on Stephen Gosson, right, his school of abuse, or there is a question on an apology for poetry by Sir Philip Sidney, or his defense of poetry, as it can also be called, you have to write about the charge as well as its response. Okay.
So Stephen Gosson's which chapter, sir? I could not follow. Please and tell me, sir.
In poetic function only.
poetic function. Okay,
Yeah, in the block
that is unit
which is
7,
poetic
sir.
function. Yeah,
Unit
in the
7.
block about poetic function, language and literature, you can
It
find
is,
it.
sir. It is unit 7.
Yeah.
7.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's actually discuss these 4 points before we close today's class. That is, literature has a social function, which means, as any other thing like technology or any other thing, we can also make use of literature for a social purpose, right? A writer is influenced by society and sometimes influences it. So it's a two-way. We produce literature because we are influenced by the society. Your experience or somebody's experience that you are writing about is nothing but the influence of the society. And when you write, you propagate that literature, it influences other people. So it is a two-way process. A writer influences the society and is influenced by the society. Because art mirrors life, right? And life is what you find in the art. And literature presents a picture of society. We are talking about imaginative literature and also non-imaginative literature to an extent. Because we are a product of this material world, we will talk about this material world, right? And our whole existence is within this material world. So literature presents the picture of a society. Literature exists independently, art for art's sake, with the aim of on its own. There is one set of people who think that let's art be for art's sake. To some extent, that is also okay, and some people believe in it, and some people propagate it. But by and large, we know that literature can be and is used as a tool, right, to propagate certain ideas, certain values in the society. And the people who are propagating certain values and certain ideas, they are also influenced by the society. Okay. I think with this, we'll stop our today's lecture here. And in the next class, we'll start talking about analysis of literary language in both poetry and prose. Okay. So thank you so much. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, sir.
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 Thank you, sir.